Hello again, my fiber friends. I'm ReRe, and this is Exploration Crochet, part of the Yarn Over Hook network. This episode kicks off a new mini-series inside Crochet, a chain of events called The People, the designers, teachers, publishers, and personalities who shaped what crochet looks like in the public record. We know that crochet is more than just stitches, tools, and trends. It was humans that turned a hook and thread into a global manifestation. And if crochet has a main character in the mid-1800s, a Victorian-era content creator and pattern influencer rolled into one, a woman who arguably invented the hustle of modern crochet, it's Mademoiselle Eleonore Riego de la Branchardière. But for the sake of my tongue and your ears, we'll refer to her as Riego. Because here's the thing, crochet didn't become global just because it was clever. Crochet spread because at some point it became reproducible, teachable at scale, publishable. Riego was a woman who took the newish fancy work and turned it into a global pattern-led empire. But before we crown anybody queen of anything, we need a moment of historical honesty. The most influential crocheters in history are anonymous, mostly women, mostly working class. Folks who were teaching each other and adapting techniques quietly over generations. Named individuals rise in the record because their work is printed, preserved, or funded. Not because they created crochet alone, and not because they were exceptionally talented. Crochet has always been a collective intelligence. So when we talk about Riego, we're not saying she invented crochet. We're saying she is one of the first people who made crochet legible to the marketplace. And that changed everything. Remember, there is a reason for the phrase the unsung hero. So please keep that in your pocket, particularly for the people portion of this series. It matters. But for now, grab your hook, pull up a loop, and let's meet the woman who didn't just give us stitches. She helped give crochet its hustle. So who was she? Riego is often dated 1828 to 1887, living about 59 years, with the same usual Victorian-era fuzziness around exact details. She's typically described as having an Irish mother and a French father, an identity that plays beautifully in the needlework marketplace, a blend of continental style and British industriousness, a heritage that would eventually place her at the center of one of the most important movements in textile history. And while there are differing voices as to when her publishing began, here's what we can say. She was a professional, not a hobbyist with a booklet, not a dabbler, not a lady who makes pretty things. Riego built a name that meant I can teach you, I can supply you, I can publish you a pattern that you can actually follow. And that professionalism is a chain event. Because once crochet stops being primarily passed from person to person and starts being sold and replicated at distance, it becomes something much bigger. It becomes an industry. And Riego wasn't just a person, Riego was a brand. In 1822, Dutch needle arts magazine Penelope was the first to refer to crochet as a craft. In 1846, Riego releases her first widely cited book, Knitting, Crochet, and Netting. This wasn't just a book of patterns, it was a business model. In the preface, she explains that these directions were tested by her pupils. She wasn't just selling a book, she was selling a service. She offered in-person follow-up instructions with her in Principal Berlin shops in London. She was creating a service network. In this book, Riego provided basically a Rosetta Stone for crochet with a section titled Shepherd or Single Crochet. At this moment in history, places were still calling crochet shepherd's knitting. Riego is a key witness to the terminology shift. She is the one helping the world transition from old folk craft language into the modern, fashionable label crochet. Crochet existed before Riego, but standardized instruction, the idea that a stranger could reproduce the same object from the same text, needed champions. That's the blueprint for everything we do now: patterns, PDFs, charts, tutorials. The vibe of, I'm over here, but you can make exactly what I made over there. If you want the moment when crochet becomes a system, just look at how Riego positions herself publicly. Let's take a peek at the Great Exhibition of the Works of Industry of All Nations. That's the first World Fair in 1851. So, the world's first soft drink, Schweppes, was the official sponsor. It was attended by the American Samuel Colt, that's the gun guy, Charles Dickens, Karl Marx, Michael Faraday, John Mercer, the inventor behind mercerized cotton, Charlotte Bronte, aka Currer Bell, Charles Dickens, and for those of you who've seen The Man Who Invented Christmas, William Thackeray was there too, Lewis Carroll, Albert Tennyson, and that's just to name a few. Oh, and it also had the first public flush toilets. But I digress. A symbol of the Victorian age, Riego appears in the official catalog as inventor and manufacturer. Her listing also included her address, 106 New Bond Street. The list of what she exhibited is extensive. This is not a doily on a side table. She had crochet lace Bertha designs with rose, shamrock, and thistle. She had robe medallions, and we'll come back to that. She had an altar cloth. She had a couvrette. She had imitation Spanish point lace. We're also going to come back to that. She had flowers, collars, and cornucopias. She had a baby's cap. She had prayer book cover designs in silk and gold. She had hand screens, applique, antimacassars, and written in the catalog notes were the words, "The designs are registered." Registered designs in 1851. That's not casual crafting. That's intellectual property strategy. And she's not operating out of a hidden parlor. Her publications advertise a real business location and supply chain. One of her later winter book publications included a direct notice pointing customers to her only establishment in London. So when we talk about the people of crochet, we're not only talking about artistry, we're talking about infrastructure, publishing, distribution, branding, retail supply, pattern standardization, design protection. Riego didn't just write patterns. She helped make crochet into a repeatable consumer craft. But for now, let's talk about output. From Golden Stars and Tatting to the Andalusian Knitting Book, she wasn't just releasing a cute project book. She was building a library, an empire of instruction across crochet, lace, tatting, knitting, and what her era called fancy works. But here's the part I want you to take particular note of. She protected her intellectual property. She made sure her works were entered at Stationery's Hall. This facility, which is still standing today, was built for the Guild of Stationers, Bookbinders, and Publishers. It held copyright records. And additionally, she printed and included notices reserving the right of translation. That's not the behavior of a casual crafter. That's a creator who understands patterns are a product, design is value, instruction is commerce. This is crochet stepping into the same path as publishing, fashion plates, and consumer goods. And if you've ever wondered why crochet patterns today feel like a standard format, pattern testing, materials list, difficulty language, stitch vocabulary, repeat logic, this is part of the deep ancestry. When you see a notice on social media for pattern testers, or pick up a crochet pattern and see a standardized list of stitches and a difficulty rating, you are looking at the DNA of Riego. Not because she invented the format alone, but because today, more than 150 years later, we know the format works. So I've mentioned Riego's catalog. Let's take a look at it and the motifs. One of Riego's most famous contributions, one that gets repeated in crochet storytelling, was the rise of the 3D crochet rose. Even in broader lace history writing, you'll find raised rose crochet named as one of the commercial Irish crochet styles, alongside pointed tricot and Honiton lace. And if we go straight into her published pattern material, we can literally see her building botanical structure, not just flat wheels. In her crochet book 11th series, she includes a rose point collar, and then launches into larger flower constructions with a calyx, repeating flower units, and, this is the key, explicit instructions to manipulate what sits in front and what sits behind. You can hear the layering logic in the writing. She says, you are to work on the upper edge, keeping the second row in front. Later, she says, keep the 7th row down at the back while you work another edge. And she even flags moments as always taking the stitch at the back. That's not just making lace. That's engineering dimension through placement, front versus back, so petals and edges can lift. You'll see it referred to as different names depending upon the publication and retellings, either Rose of England, Spanish rose, and similar heritage lace branding. The technical idea that matters is this: crochet doesn't have to be flat. Because raised floral crochet could mimic the vibe of expensive, high-status laces. Those ornate historical styles with bold motifs and luxurious texture. And this is a chain of events moment. 3D technique extends crochet's social role. Not just make a useful thing, but make a thing that looks like wealth. This is important because of what is known in the upper class as the art of frivolité. That was the art of creating purely decorative accessories without any function to embellish garments or the house. And in the Victorian era, that was status. Once crochet can convincingly do raised florals and textured motifs, it becomes a serious rival to luxury lace aesthetics, especially the kinds of ornate European laces people associated with status and ceremony. And we can prove Riego is directly marketing crochet as imitation of expensive lace because of the Great Exhibition catalog. It explicitly lists her imitation of Spanish point lace. So yes, this is the bridge. Hook plus thread plus published patterns translates into looks like money, especially for people who don't have money. That is democratization. But Riego isn't only flowers and lace. She also rides a very Victorian obsession: geometry. The era embraced symmetrical pattern designs in textiles, wallpaper, and stained glass, often incorporating sharp, clean lines. Victorian interiors loved decorative textiles, things that signal refinement and protect furniture from hair oils in everyday life. Crochet stars and wheels fit perfectly into that world. Radial symmetry, delicate thread, dramatic spokes. Her star designs, often labeled as étoiles or stars, show crochet thinking like architecture. These were often worked in extremely fine cotton, sometimes so thin it's basically sewing thread thickness. These items were used for household decor, antimacassars, and if you're not familiar with what those are, please check out my podcast from season 1, Loops, Lace, and Funnel Cakes, Crochet Goes to the Fair, as well as other decorative covers, the whole Victorian interior ecosystem. We're talking about not only rectangular things, but ornate circular wheels with spider web centers, spokes radiating outward, and edges trying to look like a crown. Again, once crochet patterns become publishable and repeatable, motifs become modular. Riego isn't only teaching stitch mechanics, she's teaching design thinking. Repeat, symmetry, motif logic, joinery, scale. She's training pattern literacy. And once this happens, crochet can produce medallion lace, star wheels, joining systems, large textiles made with repeatable motifs and units. That's not just a stitch. That is design language. Now here's the part that blows up any stereotype that she was only lace and collars. One of the best range proofs is how she pivots from Victorian lace energy to London winter practicality. Riego helped popularize what her era often labeled tricot, what modern crocheters will recognize as Afghan stitch territory, or Tunisian crochet. In her winter book, Think London Winters, Practical Warmth, she publishes thicker, warmer garments and home items. She wasn't only selling delicate, look how refined I am projects. In the Abergeldy Winter Book, the materials list straight up calls for Walker's Tricot Needle, that long hook needle hybrid associated with what we now group under Tunisian long hook crochet. Inside the same book, she labels items in tricot écossais. Raise 11 loops in the ordinary tricot stitch, put the needle into the next stitch, and bring the wool through in a loop. That is unmistakably long hook Tunisian logic. Loops collected on the tool, then worked back. She was meeting her audience where they lived. You need fine lace for fashion, but you also need warmth for survival. This is another moment. A craft becomes culturally dominant when it serves both ends of life, special occasion elegance and everyday utility. Riego's range helped crochet sit in both chairs. Crochet isn't just a delicate lace pastime. It becomes a full wardrobe technology. Riego publishes for the reality of her audience. You might want lace collars, but you also need warm capes, muffs, and winter garments. In other words, Riego were serving both fantasy, look rich, and function, don't freeze. Now, let's circle back and talk about the Victorian stage where everybody wanted to be seen. The Great Exhibition at the Crystal Palace in 1851. The exhibit catalog lists her many entries, and one of her later publications proudly prints an awarded statement for the skill displayed in the imitation of old Spanish and other costly laces. That is not subtle. Her exhibition work included medallions. Her patterns repeatedly show complex joinery and chain loop ornamentation consistent with the style. Riego exhibited major pieces, These weren't a few squares joined together. These were large, complex textiles, big statement units. They were joined with delicate connectors like chain loop edging and picot-like effects. Think little lace teeth. The point is, she showed crochet at a scale that said, this is not a parlor trick. This is not a beginner pastime. This is textile engineering. And she leaned into the signature statement again and again. Crochet can imitate old, costly lace styles. So this is another moment. When crochet is seen in public exhibition spaces, when it becomes award-worthy, it gains cultural permission to be taken seriously. And she didn't stop in 1851. She exhibited in international fairs in 1855 and again in 1862, and she won. She started printing prize medal imagery on the covers of her books. By 1867, in the Abergaildy Winter Book, she added the ultimate flex. By special appointment to Her Royal Highness the Princess of Wales. This was Alexandria of Denmark, wife of King Edward VII. She was telling every middle-class woman in England, you can't afford the princess's lifestyle, but for the price of this booklet and a ball of cotton, you can wear her lace. So what is her lasting impact? For the first person in the People series of my Crochet a Chain of Events, Riego didn't just give us a motif. She gave us major chain event moments. Moments that had a direct effect on crochet's evolution. Things that helped to make crochet a global phenomenon. Tested and publishable patterns. Standardized instructions. Scalable teaching. Protected designs. Celebrity endorsements. Advertising. Consumer distribution, duality with regard to life function. She helped prove that crochet could be an industry, and that changed how crochet moved through the world. Now here's a bonus. People ask, did she invent Irish crochet? And you'll see that attribution repeated in general craft summaries, sometimes very confidently. But because we are taking a serious and critical look at crochet history, not folklore, here's the more accurate, stronger story. Riego is best understood as one of the major forces who systematized and popularized crochet lace styles. These styles became associated with Irish production and Irish crochet schools. Even sources that praise her admit we know frustratingly little biographically, and we know the credit landscape in textile history can get messy. We see it today. Some dates we know: the Irish potato famine ran from August 1845 into 1852. Riego published her first book in 1846. Historically, it's safer to say, as opposed to inventing it, she codified it. While Irish families were using crochet to survive the potato famine, Riego was the one who turned those techniques into a standardized, teachable system. She made it industrial. Her legacy here is literal. Long after the famine had ended and after her death, a trust in her name was established and administered by the Royal Dublin Society. This fund helped provide designs and money to develop the Irish lace industry. So she might not have invented the first stitch, but she built the machine that kept the industry alive. And whether or not she invented Irish lace, she absolutely helped create the conditions where Irish lace could scale through publishable patterns, fashionable designs, and a market trained to want crochet that looks like expensive lace. So, we've spent a lot of time talking about one individual, but I want everyone to remember crochet has always been a collective intelligence. It was built by anonymous hands long before it was stamped with a famous name. So, in this People series, we're going to hold both truths at once. We honor the names that shaped the record, and we respect the countless unnamed makers who shaped the craft itself. Riego's legacy proves that crochet has always been a sophisticated blend of artistic innovation and sharp business acumen. She treated crochet like the serious art and industry it could be, which helped turn local, often anonymous techniques into a global language. By transforming a folk craft into a standardized, royal approved industry, she elevated the status of every person who picks up a hook from a mere hobbyist to a participant in a grand historical tradition. Her success reminds us that crochet is not just a quiet pastime, but a powerful tool for economic independence and the democratization of luxury. During this series, we'll continue to follow the ripple effect, because once crochet becomes standardized on paper, it can cross oceans, languages, and class lines faster than any one person can walk it. And once it's portable, it becomes unstoppable. I want to take a moment to offer my sincerest thanks to Project Gutenberg and the University of Pennsylvania's online book library, where you can see not only all 17 volumes of Riego's The Crochet Book series, but also other books she wrote. I will leave the link for both of those in the show notes. I'm ReRe. This has been Exploration Crochet. Thank you for listening.